Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to the Tenure launch. I'm Claire Kelly. I'm the Marketing and Production Coordinator with New West Press. And we're here on Zoom tonight to celebrate Kieran Egan's first novel, Tenure. I'm hoping for another, with two special guest readers, AJ Devlin and Sam Wiebe. We are recording the reading, so you may have heard a robot voice saying, "Recording is starting now." We want to be able to share this event with anyone who's not able to come tonight. So the event will be put on YouTube later. If you're comfortable being seen, feel free to leave your cameras on so that the readers aren't reading into the void. It's nice to have some sort of feedback while you're reading. If you're not comfortable with that, feel free to leave them off, but please do leave your microphones off just because the background noise can build and build and build, and people end up shouting at their computers, which always feels weird, unless it deserves it. After all three authors read, we'll be having a Q&A. If you move your mouse around, should be able to find something that says chat, or that's where you'll be able to put your questions, and I'll read them aloud to Kieran, and Kieran will answer them if he feels like. He can't say no. It's a free launch, and it's his launch. So we're coming to you from Alberta and BC, and I'd like to acknowledge that the land we are gathering on is the traditional gathering place for many Indigenous peoples. We honor, respect, and celebrate the history, languages, ceremonies, and cultures of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit who call these territories home. We are less than a week past the first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. I hope you were able to reflect on what it means to be on stolen land, and to write to your provincial government rep if you live in a province that has not fully recognized that day. If you didn't get the chance to do so on the 29th, there's always today and tomorrow. This is not a project that ends just because the government has set aside a day for it. We should be doing the work regularly and investing in the work. One thing I did look up, a way you can help if you are able to, is to donate to the Vancouver Aboriginal Friendship Center Society. I chose this because all these books center around Vancouver, and I think if we're writing about a place, we should think about the people and the land to whom the people belong. You know, I went off script and I threw myself off, everyone. Yeah, so this is a Vancouver nonprofit organization. If you're ever able to help out, please help out. The link will be in the chat as well. Final thing before the readings start, the official bookseller for the event is Main Street Book Warehouse. They're a bookstore that's very supportive of its community, especially genre writing, which is some of my favorite writing. It's now, for me, my genre of preference is horror, so we're entering my happy time when I get to watch slasher flicks and practice being scared of something that ends when the DVD stops, as opposed to checking COVID numbers and stuff like that. Carolina will be providing the link to the bookstore as well. That's the link where you can get a copy of Kieran's novel if you don't already have it, or any of the books by our guest readers. You don't need to do it right now, but if you click it, open the window, go back after the reading. Books are great, guys. Our first reader tonight is AJ Devlin. AJ grew up in Greater Vancouver and studied screenwriting. After working in Hollywood for many years, he moved back to Port Moody and began work on Cobra Clutch, the first and award-winning entry into the Hammerhead Jed series. In 2020, the sequel, Rolling Thunder, was released. And he sold so many copies out of his garage. It made me very happy because that was just as all the new world was happening. And yeah, I didn't know how our authors were going to handle it. And AJ basically set up shop and yeah, got copies out there. The third book in the Hammerhead series, 5 Moves of Doom, comes out fall 2022. AJ has also been befriending New West Press authors and is incredibly supportive of their work. So I'm always just chuffed, I believe the word would be, to introduce AJ and hear him read. Welcome, AJ.
Thank you, Claire. And thank you. Congratulations to Kieran for tonight. This is exciting. And then hello to Sam, who's reading as well, and his new book's coming out. So this is an exciting time for Canadian and Vancouver-based crime fiction. I see New West's upcoming author JT Siemens is here tonight with his Rocky poster in the background. I would expect nothing less. And then I think I saw Chris Rackner here. He's an author back in Ontario. Hi, Chris. Good to see you. Anyways, I'm going to start off by doing a brief reading from the opening of Rolling Thunder. This is the sequel to Cobra Clutch, and the series follows an ex-professional wrestler turned private investigator in Vancouver. And in the first book, Hammerhead Jed catches a case where he takes him into the world of local independent wrestling. And in the sequel, he is hired, well, I'll read it, but he is drawn into the world. He catches a case that draws him into the world of women's roller derby. So without any further ado, I'm going to start off with just a bit of the opening here of Rolling Thunder. Two thoughts popped into my head when the 300-pound woman on roller skates slapped me on the ass. First, that she must have been skating very fast before delivering the spank, as the force with which she pummeled my posterior sent shockwaves throughout my body and caused me to stumble forward. No small feat when you consider that I'm 6'3" and weigh close to 240, give or take a few pounds, depending on whether there's been a spike in my milkshake intake. The second thought was that the sheer size of this heavyset hellion on wheels' hand was astounding, for when she delivered her vigorous blow to my buttocks, her giant meat hook nearly engulfed the entire circumference of my behind. I regained my balance and was rubbing my stinging rump when I realized what had just transpired turned a simple bum assault from a playful incident into a full-blown calamity. Upon impact, the large, delicious Dairy Queen banana milkshake I had been nursing flew out of my hand and splattered onto the concrete floor. I was no longer annoyed. Now I was livid. I heard the rolling fanny whacker cackle riotously, her laughter echoing throughout the arena. I locked eyes with her across the track, and she winked at me and blew me a kiss. I furrowed my brow and opened my mouth to let fly a string of obscenities. But before I had the chance, Stephanie Danielson, aka Stormy Days, ripped into her teammate like a tornado in a trailer park. "Jesus Christ, Jabba," she yelled. "What the hell's the matter with you?" Stormy turned to me and gently rubbed my arm. "Sorry, Jed. I know how much you like your milkshakes." I stared at the banana-flavored ice cream goodness as it continued to spill out of the cup onto the glossy gray concrete like a brother in arms bleeding out in the battlefield. I sighed deeply. At that moment, the booty-smacking milkshake assassin completed another lap on the roller derby track. "You got yourself some nice buns there, Butterfingers," she hollered as she whizzed by and continued around the track for another lap. "That's enough, Jabba," barked Stormy before patting my arm some more. I finally snapped out of my milkshake morning and focused. "Why do you keep calling her Jabba?" I asked. "That's her name," replied Stormy. "That's not really her name." "Yes, it is." "So if I look at her driver's license, it would say Jabba?" "It may as well. This is roller derby, Jed. Our names are what empower us as warrior women and make us who we are. It's why back when I used to wrestle, I was Stormy Days, but now when I hit the track, I become the Amazon-bee." Stormy put her hands on her hips and puffed out her chest proudly. I had met her 8 months ago while unofficially working my first case. Her ex-boyfriend and my former friend and pro wrestling tag team partner, Johnny Mamba, had been murdered, and my investigation led me to her. Although I briefly considered her a suspect in Johnny's death, it quickly became clear she was a good woman who had loved them dearly. I had not seen Stormy since Johnny's funeral. She left professional wrestling after Johnny died, and I hadn't heard anything about her until she called the office that morning and asked to meet as soon as possible. Stormy looked even better than I remembered, especially decked out in her roller derby gear. She was dressed in a pair of form-fitting blue short shorts and a red sports bra underneath a white baseball baby tee that covered her curvy chest but left her taut midsection exposed. Her blonde hair was in pigtails, the tips dyed red and blue, while her symmetrical face was painted in white and black makeup, with drops of fake blood around her pouty ruby red lips to give her that oh-so-fashionable, sexy undead look. Finally, she wore retro knee-high striped athletic socks underneath a bedazzling pair of rainbow-colored roller skates. With her 3 extra inches in height, for the first time, we were standing nearly eye to eye. With her gaudy outfit and lean yet feminine muscular build, she looked like a Walking Dead version of the Batman villainess Harley Quinn on steroids. "Jabba and Amazon-bee," I said, shaking my head. And I thought professional wrestling was overly theatrical. Never mind Jabba, Stormy said. The one you really need to watch out for is Barra Cougar. If she gets her paws on you, she'll make Jabba's spank feel like a love tap. At this point, the locker room door slammed open and over a dozen women, all dolled up in different outfits and makeup, and all wearing retro-style four-wheeled roller skates, charged toward the roller derby track and joined Jabba for warm-up laps. Stormy escorted me out of their way as they attacked the track with the ferociousness of rabid wolverines. Hoots, hollers, and war cries were spit out with both confidence and vitriol, and by the time I wrapped my head around the unusual sight before me, Stormy had guided me over to the player's bench and taken a seat. She tapped the hard plastic and motioned for me to sit. I slowly eased my aching bottom onto the unforgiving surface and joined her, still transfixed by the colorful swarm of skaters rolling around the track at varying speeds. You guys dress up like this for every practice? I asked. No, usually only for games, replied Stormy, but today is sort of a dress rehearsal. I nodded as Stormy continued. So how about I tell you why I really asked you here? You mean it wasn't for an enormous woman on wheels named after a Star Wars villain to beat my ass like a rented mule? She smiled briefly before reaching out and squeezing my hand. I need your help, Jed. She waved her other glittery gloved hand toward the roller skaters. We need your help. And that chapter concludes with Hammerhead Jed agreeing to take the case, and he begins looking for their roller derby coach who's gone missing right before playoffs.
We've talked about roller derby names, and
Yes.
I realized the roller derby name I would pick would tie together your book with Kieran's book, because I write poetry. Sylvia Wrath is a great roller derby name.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, and I was actually by happenstance looking up to buy roller derby skates today.
Nice.
I don't know what got in me. I also watched an MMA documentary, so maybe I talked to you too much the other day.
Yeah, probably. That's one of my favorite things about roller derby is, and in the book, is that I didn't make up a single name. I just Googled roller derby names, and there's some of the most creative and inventive names I've ever come across in any form of athletics.
Yeah, I think it's the sport I'd be best at because I don't fall down easy, but I bump into stuff a lot, and I think
Sounds like you're natural.
yeah, I think my low center of gravity would be very much suited to, and probably past the point where I would do it. But I was thinking about it and then Googling roller skates. But
Nice.
Thank you for reading and coming to celebrate Tenure.
That's my pleasure.
And now back to my script. Our second reader tonight is Sam Wiebe. Sam Wiebe is the award-winning author of the Wakefield novels, including Invisible Dead, Cut You Down, and Helen Gone, which is coming out shortly. So 23rd, is it, Sam? 23rd. That's not all. He has two other novels, Never Going Back and Last of the Independents, and has edited an anthology titled Vancouver Noir. It's about Vancouver Noir. Very aptly titled, and no subtitle needed. Wiebe's work has won the Crime Writers of Canada Award and the Kobo Emerging Writers Prize, and he's been shortlisted for the Edgar, Hammett, Seamus, and City of Vancouver book prizes. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you very much, Claire. I'm just imagining a wave of applause carrying me up to the stage right now. Thank you for hosting this, Claire. Thank you, AJ, for your great reading and for being a brother in arms. And mostly thank you, Kieran, for writing such an interesting book and precipitating all this. So my third Wakeland novel comes out October 23rd. So I'm going to read the short story that inspired it. So I adapted and modified this and turned it into Helen Gone. But the original story is called Head Down, and this was published in the back matter of the Violent comic book series from Image Comics, which came out a few years ago. So I'm actually reading from a comic book right at the back here. So this is a short story about a robbery which happens in Vancouver's Chinatown area, and an act of violence, which actually turns out to be an act of kindness. So this is head down. He asked her why she wanted his side of things, him being a reformed addict, somewhat reformed alcoholic, and convicted wife killer. The cop admitted he wasn't exactly a star witness, but he'd been there that morning. He'd laid eyes on the shooters, and most importantly, he'd lived. The cop made sure he had coffee and a breakfast roll. She flipped her notebook to a fresh page, wrote his name along the top. She smiled, showing a sympathy he doubted she felt and knew he didn't deserve. Take your time, she said. Tell me what you saw. Take me through this whole morning. He said he was up at 3:30, showered, then prayed. At 4:45, he dressed. Prayed for a full hour? The cop asked. Every morning, pray and ask forgiveness and seek guidance on how to move more perfectly under his blessed sheltering hand. The cop took this in. He could tell she wasn't moved. She cared only about the robbery and its aftermath, how he'd survived. She was young, maybe late 20s. Difficult to understand anything at that age, he thought. Another of his trials for me. The cop was polite and didn't challenge him. She let him explain about buying his coffee from the Korean grocer, the back and forth they'd had over the grocer's kids, and then the cart he'd taken from the locker in the basement of his shitbag tenement. And then you headed up Main, she prompted. Right, up Main to Kiefer to the edge of Chinatown. Not a rich area, but heavy foot traffic, lots of commuters, a spot he'd had to fight for with the other vendors. He'd been in place on his corner around 5:10, the sun just emerging, a dry summer day. His cart contained bundles of calendars, and he readied them for the start of the commuter onrush that would hit Main Street around 5:30, when the first buses started running toward the financial district. The calendars were a strategy to mobilize the city's indigent, reward their creativity by featuring their photos, plus allow them to sell them and pocket the cash. The idea was to spread a hopeful image of the city, counter its perceived indifference. Vancouver, the place that cares. The corner where he usually set up skirted a 4-story office building with a black glass front. Asian-owned, a few pagoda-like features in the sweeping design of its awnings. He'd waved to the receptionist, an older lady, Malay or Cambodian. Nice. She'd glared at him the first few months he'd set up outside, but eventually she'd warmed to him, seeing his work ethic. She'd actually brought him tea a few times. Shitty tea, but still. And then the van, the cop said, steering him. How long were you in place before you saw the van? Maybe 10 minutes? So 5:20, about when it started? He'd seen the van circle the block when he'd first arrived, a matte black Econoline that belched gray clouds of exhaust. Noted the 2 men on the front bench. Noted the blacked out side windows. Didn't get much of a look at the driver or passenger. You remember how they dressed? They wore sunglasses, I remember that. Canucks hat on the one driving, old school black and orange. The other was bearded, think he had a shaved head. It's not me, by the way. He saw the van crawl up Kiefer and make another right. 10 minutes went by. Then it reappeared, stopped by the entrance to the building. The side door slid open and 2 men piled out. Both were carrying rifles, one with a hockey bag slung across his chest. Describe them, the cop said. White guys, I think, dressed in black, had masks on, black with the cutout eyes. Balaclavas. Right. They might have had shotguns. I didn't really see the weapons. Didn't see them all that close. The driver and passenger stayed in the van, I think. And then what happened? They stormed the building's front entrance. And that was really all he saw. He heard what came after. Couldn't stop hearing it, 3 days removed. The silence, 1 minute bleeding into the next. Then the first ripple of gunfire, soft from inside. The door opening, the screams, the shots through the glass, the weird horse-like whinny of the receptionist as she was shot through the lungs, the unmuffled, deliberate roar of the final shots into the onlookers up the street, the squeals and exclamations as the commuters fell. And then the snarl as the van raced up the block, its engine noise fading to silence. And you saw none of that, the cop said. I was around the corner, other side of the building. The cop bit her lip. Main Street runs north-south, she said. He shrugged at that, so the cop spelled it out for him, her temper flaring slightly. The buses run along Main. They don't turn till Hastings. Your cart and blanket were set at the edge, facing the street, not around the corner. So how'd you end up so far away from the action? Action, he thought. Listen to her. She wants these guys bad. He hesitated before saying he'd been rousted. By whom? Leaning forward, her pen poised. Guy in a dark coat grabbed my cart and blanket and flung it around the corner away from the entrance. I was scrambling to pick up my stuff when I heard the first shots. You didn't mention this man to the patrol officers, the cop said. Had you seen him before? You know, maybe. I see a lot of people, but you don't remember. No idea why he'd do that. None. But it's funny. He probably saved my life. Funny, the cop said. Not funny, but he tried to find the words, but ultimately gave up. She wouldn't understand. She'd chalk it up to, well, not to Providence. But the fact was the man had saved his life. He'd shoved him back, grabbed the handle of the cart, and flung it up the block, around the corner, away from the entrance. It had jolted into the curb, the calendars spilling out into the street. He'd sworn at the man and stooped to rescue his merchandise from the gasoline rainbowed puddles that ran along the gutters. The man had told him to stay down. The man had been wearing black jeans and a leather coat, worn looking, and had a soldierly air to him, and a black toque over his head. When he'd said to get down, the man had his own hands up, rolling the toque down over his face, fitting his eyes into the hand-torn holes. The man had looked back, briefly, to make sure he was busy with his calendars and didn't pose a threat, or maybe that he was safe. The man pulled a pistol from his jacket, then turned the corner to join the others. And a few more minutes later came the first shots. Thank you.
I love the details in it, Sam. And you made me, I'm always looking for tricks to get characters' descriptions in. And I realize crime has such, like, police interviewing someone to say, what did they look like, is a very, like, describe them, is a very, very useful way to get characters to describe each other.
Well, I watched a lot of Law and Order back in the day. NYPD Blue, too.
Yeah, Law and Order was my jam. That was on at a really good time midday if I skipped school. And do you have a launch planned at all, or?
I'm going to be doing a very small event at Pulp Fiction Books on the 23rd when the book comes out. I'm also planning some sort of an online event, still in the planning stages, but the book can be pre-ordered now. And anyone who pre-orders Helen Gone and sends me proof, especially if you order it from Book Warehouse, who is hosting our awesome event tonight, will be entered to win a 5-book Vancouver crime library chosen by me.
Ooh.
So please pre-order now. And thank you so much for listening.
That could get you through the winter. Winter in Vancouver is probably not as threatening as the winter in Edmonton, to be honest, but I'm already preparing my winter reading. Yeah, but let us know at New West Press and we'll spread the word too.
Thanks so much.
And sorry, I have to scroll. This brings us to our man of the hour, Kieran Egan, and his debut novel, Tenure, which is a crime thriller crossed with a comedic university novel. It has a great hook. Take a midlife crisising drug kingpin who is bound by honor to help the man who saved his life by getting his professor wife tenure at her university. Kieran lives in Vancouver, BC. He was born in Ireland, educated in England and the US. He worked in Simon Fraser University's Faculty of Education, where he recently retired from. Sorry, if I go off script for a bio, it's never a good sign. And he has an interest in Japanese style gardens, which may or may not come up in the book. He built one at the rear of his house, which resulted in a book about gardening called Building My Zen Garden. And that was released by Houghton Mifflin in the year 2000. And he was also on a TV episode in the Recreating Eden series. So I can already say that your hobby of Zen gardening, way more better than my hobbies of knitting my mom a scarf based on the Blue Jays win-loss record this year. So like, wow. Let's give it up for Kieran.
What up?
I think it's your turn to read.
Do you want me to read now? Can't hear you, Claire. Claire,
Sorry, I muted myself once I introduced you. Yes, it's your turn to read. I don't have any sparklers, but
okay. So a lot of the book is about the drug lord trying to persuade a university tenure committee to vote for his wife for a positive tenure.
Not his wife.
Oh, sorry, my wife. the drug. Well, part of my introduction was to be, this is my wife, and the bit we're going to read involves a dialogue. And Susanna will read one part of it, and I will read the other.
He just said context.
Sorry.
Context.
So the drug lord assumed it would be very easy to persuade all of these professors, by threats or bribes. And this is his first example of dealing with one of the professors at the university. According to the briefing file that Frank had prepared for him, Greenwood arrived around 12:30 each day. Still about 5 minutes to go, but here she came. Head down inside the hood of her waterproof coat, she walked as though her hips were made of glass, shoulders bent, as though trying to fit into as small a space as possible. As she hesitantly approached the covered rest area, Mark turned sideways, eyes down at the file, to be as non-threatening a presence as a 6'4" man with a dark moustache could be to a mild and apparently fearful woman. He hoped she wouldn't avoid her favorite place because he was there and decide to eat her lunch elsewhere. If she did, he would follow her, of course, but that might make their coming transaction a little more difficult. Edging crabwise into the rest area, looking at him with what seemed a mixture of fear and distaste, she sat and immediately pulled from her bag 2 plastic bowls. She opened them on the seat beside her and began scooping the white, globular contents of one on top of the yellowish contents of the other. Delving back into the bag for a transparent sachet of what looked like mixed nuts and seeds, she shook them onto the bowl of mush on the seat beside her, then back into the bag for a newspaper, followed by a bottle of mineral water. Battling the paper as though fighting some recalcitrant animal, she located what she wanted, slapping the crumpled mess onto her knees. She took a spoon from her bag, picked up the plastic bowl, and began stirring the white and yellow and nutty material together till they looked like something retrieved from a vomitorium. She raised a spoonful towards her mouth, hurriedly putting it down again with a suppressed groan. With her free hand, she plucked from around the top teeth a comprehensively sized clear plastic and metal retainer and put it onto the rough and, Mark thought, none too clean seat beside her. Looks delicious, Mark hazarded as an opening. She glanced up at him as though she was considering whether to make a run for it. But she'd clearly invested too much effort in laying out lunch. Below her large eyes, made a little alarming by magnifying lenses, her face seemed to recede down and back into a small chin that almost imperceptibly rested in a large and loose neck. Alwyn Greenwood was not a beauty. She fixed him with a glare that seemed to assess uncertainly what his intentions and meaning might be.
My own invention.
She said with a surprisingly clear and almost musical voice.
Cottage cheese and crushed pineapple. with nuts, seeds, and dried berries.
So that's what Frank's note meant about terrific voice. Mark had assumed she must be a singer. It was low, almost husky, yet clear, and he wanted to say sweet. Eyes closed, one would expect such a voice to come from a goddess. Most nutritious too.
Yes.
Greenwood nodded, still eyeing him uncertainly. Then, as he said nothing further, bobbed her head down to read the paper on her knee. She spooned the goo into her mouth. Mark waited a few minutes, glancing through the file Frank had prepared. As she scraped the bowl clean, he began to recite quietly. Born, Montreal, 1962, excelled at swimming and gymnastics at school, scholarship to McGill University, graduated with a 4-point average in English honors in 1984, master's degree in philosophy with a thesis on Aristotle's Poetics, PhD specializing in late Victorian theater from Stanford University. First job at the University of Texas at Austin, accepted an associate professorship there with tenure in 1994.
What? Are you reading this? I am at something of a loss to account for what's going on here. Those are facts about me you were reading. No doubt another of my potential biographers seeking an interview.
Forgive me, Dr. Greenwood, a clumsy way of introducing a topic I want to discuss with you. May I say that you have an extraordinarily beautiful voice.
People tell me they can listen to it by the hour, which means they don't care about what I say, they just like the sound. But perhaps I may be allowed to use my beautiful voice to ask what you're playing at.
I had a colleague prepare some files for me on people involved with an issue that concerns me. You are among those people, but I must confess, the information in your file helps me less than in most of the other cases.
Always nice to be considered a case, of course. What am I a case of?
A case of tenure committee.
I would have preferred a biographer. When one can make little sense of one's own life, or not much like the sense one can make, it would be so engaging to have a dark, handsome man with a luxuriant moustache delve energetically into the case. But it's the tenure committee. So you're interested in someone else's biography. Whose?
Susan Pybus.
Funny world, isn't it? I wouldn't have predicted that. So what's to be done about Susan?
I have an interest in her getting tenure, so I would like you to vote for her.
Do you have a good reason for her to be given tenure?
Yes, I think so.
Well, that's good enough for me. All right.
Mark paused, surprised. I hadn't anticipated it would be so easy.
Clearly, the person who composed the file missed out important information.
But would you tell me why you're so ready to change your vote?
You said the reason for doing so was good. Should I doubt you?
I'd have thought you might want more information or evidence.
One either trusts someone or one doesn't, though there are, I'll grant, dreary cases where it takes events to decide one. Probably, when I think about it, the world might be marginally better if Susan got tenure rather than turfed out. She's one of the few people in that unlikely conglomeration of lost souls we call the English department who actually seems to like reading and teaching. Do you want to tell me the reason why you think she should get tenure?
I'm not sure you would approve.
A good reason, but one of which I mightn't approve. Perhaps we need to discuss the meaning of good. I generally approve the good. Indeed, there are some philosophers who argue that that's all that we mean by good, things we approve of. So your uncertainty about my approving this good reason raises doubt-incurring questions. And yet I decided to trust you. What's a girl to do?
Almond Greenwood began to gather together the accoutrements of her lunch, tossed them loosely into her bag, crushed the paper in on top of them. She lifted the retainer from the seat beside her, pushed it into her mouth, and stood up. She removed the retainer again.
It's been a smallish, but not entirely inconsiderable pleasure speaking with you. I will vote for Susan's tenure and trust that good will come of it.
She put the retainer back in her mouth and, a little to Mark's distress, shook his hand with slightly damp fingers. But instead of walking away, she stood still for a moment, then returned to where she had been sitting. Removing the retainer again and putting it back on the seat, she sighed.
I had thought I could leave it all deliciously incomplete. You know, they being anonymous academics who do things out of our line of vision, they have done experiments by reading stories to people and asking them later what they remember. One discovery was that unfinished stories are remembered much more precisely and over a much longer time span than completed stories. We crave the sense of an ending, and denied it, just crave meaning, I suppose. I had thought what a delicious time I might have reflecting on this meeting and constructing wonderfully implausible scenarios to make sense of it, material for endless sleepless nights. But I'm afraid I crave explanation.
As do I, said Mark. I can't make sense of why you agreed so easily. I don't think trusting me is sufficient, and I'm not sure I can trust you.
Really? I didn't mean that part. Well, I suppose I shouldn't have said that, about the reason being I trust you. I thought it might be safer for me. Now that you seem quite reasonable, I should say that I really can't change my mind about my vote.
Mark paused, entirely surprised again, uncertain what to do next. I think then we need to discuss the matter further. Perhaps I can persuade you.
No, I don't think so. You can try, of course. But first is for you the confessional. I want to know why you should care about Susan's tenure. I don't want to know everything, as that would be too prosaic and deprive me of all potential exegetical pleasure later. Let's have a 20 questions routine. Does your job influence your involvement in this case?
Not really.
Not really. Is it yes or no?
The job is entirely incidental, but if it had not been for my job, the precipitating event would not have taken place.
Well, that's no good. You're allowed to answer yes or no, or you can say that the question is too imprecise to allow an answer. I'll not count that answer. So I still have 20 questions. Well, no, that wouldn't be fair either, would it? I mean, I have gained information from your improper response, but remember, only yes or no.
I will try to stick to the rules.
Very good. Are you sexually entangled, so to speak, with Susan?
No.
I was going to say how disappointing, but on reflection, the negative response keeps the mystery alive. How prosaic it might have been if you had said yes. And now, how disappointing for my own hopes of an entanglement. Now, do you stand to gain in some way? Let's begin with financially.
No.
What other ways are there? Aesthetically? No, don't answer that. A silly notion. I don't want to lose one of my questions on that. Are you acting on behalf of some other member? No, more general, of someone else.
No.
Has Susan appealed to you for help?
No.
How long have you known? No, I have to put it differently. Have you known Susan for more than 5 years?
No.
More than 1 year?
No.
More than a week?
No.
Oh dear, what a waste of questions. Do you know Susan?
No.
You don't know her. This is interesting. How many questions have I had?
I thought you were counting.
How can I count and think of incisive questions at the same time? I think it's about 6.
I think it's more like 9.
Oh dear. Could we split the difference and call it 7?
It's 9.
If you insist. Have you ever done anything like this before?
No.
I just can't imagine a plausible scenario. You've invented this entirely implausible situation just to meet me.
I would, of course, have done just that if I'd known about you, but I'm afraid the answer is no.
That wasn't a question, just an inaccurate, as it turns out, or rather, as you claim, assertion. Does Susan know you were doing this on her behalf?
No.
Are you doing this because you wish to redress what you see as a wrong?
No.
11.
12.
Really?
Yes, 13.
You certainly can't count that one. Was the file you have there prepared by a friend of Susan's?
No.
Do you know Susan's husband, Jeffrey?
Yes.
Aha. Are you doing this on Jeffrey's behalf?
No.
Oh, are you an old friend of Jeffrey's?
No.
Is that 15?
16.
You know Jeffrey, but haven't known him long. And he's, as far as I can see, your only connection to Susan. But he isn't paying you, as you do not stand to gain financially. And the file you have wasn't prepared by a friend of Susan's, which in my view rules out Jeffrey. Was the file prepared by someone Jeffrey knows?
No.
Good heavens, just 3 to go. This is difficult. Are you doing this as a favor to Jeffrey?
Yes.
Yes, as a favor. What kind of a favor? Are you sexually entangled with Jeffrey?
No.
No, I only meant that as a joke. That doesn't count. I still have 2 more questions. A favor to Jeffrey in return for something he did for you?
Yes.
So what did he do for you? I must admit, while I may be getting closer to the answer, this is promising to be much less interesting than it was when I knew so much less. Knowledge can be a great prosaicizer. I suppose there is such a word. So you are repaying a favor to Jeffrey, and it isn't sexual or financial. How dreary. What else is there to motivate the human heart to action? Last question, too.
We'll stop there.
Well, thank you both for reading. It was it was really fun. I'm glad there were two people because it is a real call and response scene. Like I've never played 20 questions before. I'm gonna have to figure out. I don't even know how. Like, how do you make 20 questions a game when it's not a drug kingpin who wants a professor to vote tenure? I'll Google later.
And you
But
have a 10-year-old child hanging around.
oh, my nickname when I was little was Curious George because I was that kid who just asked 8,000 questions. But congrats again, Kieran. Thanks for writing such a fun book. I enjoyed working on it a lot with you, and everyone, you should. This is your chance to be writing questions in the chat box.
Oh.
But I'll start off with a question first to, give people time to type. How did you come to writing fiction? And did you write poetry first and go to fiction, or vice versa?
I'm not sure. I think I was always doing a bit of both in a very amateur kind of way. And it's only since retirement that I had the leisure to sit down and try and do both in a more professional way. So this is the first novel. My first book of poetry came out a couple of months ago. And I hope I'll have another novel in a while and another book of poetry, but we'll see.
Do you find, because I've been trying to write, I say trying to write fiction. I've been working on fiction, but I've written poetry for more of my life. And poetry, like I get an idea, I sit down and write a poem. But with the fiction, it's like putting the paces through it, like sitting down most days and trying to write. Do you find you get different things out of writing the different forms?
Oh, yeah, I think so. With a poem, you have to have a sense of what you're writing about. I'm one of the kinds of fiction writers who has no idea what's going to be on the next page. So I just make it up as I go along, basically. I had no idea about how the characters would develop.
Oh, you're not a plotter.
No, not at all.
Yeah, no, I'm a plotter.
Oh.
I have to, though. I think it's because I have ADHD. I have to plotter. Away I go. Unless I can obsess on just the poem, which is like one idea, circling around one idea obsessively. Just checking if there's any questions in the question box yet. No questions yet. Carolina, if anybody sends questions directly to you, pass them on to me. So Mark is a character reaching a precipice about whether to continue in his current profession and how to spend the rest of his life if he chooses to walk away. This is a conflict that, many people are experiencing during the pandemic. Of course, hopefully without the drug kingpin aspect, but okay, some probably with the drug kingpin aspect. It makes it more relatable, though. That's that conflict. You've said you don't plot, but did you have a sort of idea that led you into the book? Like, was Mark's conflict something that led you into the book, or did it emerge while writing?
The latter. It emerged very much as writing. I mean, I had no idea about him as a character even, and the initial idea of the drug lord getting tenure at the university seemed like fun, and then the characters just grew as I wrote it.
That makes sense. They are very believable for a book that's about a drug kingpin and sort of academic, like grotesques, almost like characters on the outside. Yeah, but they are believable in a way that seems like they grew organically. Do you plant your gardens?
Yeah, generally.
Okay. I'm like, where does the planning go? Oh, so here's some questions. Catherine has a question that says, how much of the book is autobiographical? Which I don't know much about you, Kieran, but I'm hoping you're not a drug kingpin.
Well, I think Catherine's asking that because she appears in it, but not as Catherine. No, there are just tiny bits of incidental bits that are easy to put in that are sort of autobiographical, but on the whole, there's nothing much. Most of it is just pure invention. And I feel badly that I have made the academics all nutcases of one kind or another. Not all of them, but many of them. And I should apologize to the English department at UBC. But
there is an like, to be an academic is you're a bit obsessive, right? Like you have to be, or like focused, maybe is the kinder word to put it.
well, I think
and there's good weird and bad weird, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's the opposite of focus in a sense, because as an academic, you have rather more freedom. And I think one of the reasons that academia lends itself to novels is precisely that freedom, because if you're working in an accountant's office, you're constrained much more in what you can expect to do and the things that you do. So academia is...
Yeah, you get to choose what you're obsessed about.
That's right.
Yeah. So there's Michael says way too much of the book is autobiographical, but I don't know.
I'm sure he says an excessive amount is autobiographical if it was Michael.
Chris has a question. Did you have a hard time with campus politics during your career?
No, I actually had a very easy time. I feel almost guilty that the trials and tribulations that most people go on about endlessly just were never a concern to me. And I should point out that my wife did not have a problem with tenure either at her university, which was indeed UBC.
Because if not, you would have had to go in there and start cracking heads.
Right.
Magnus has a question. Who are your influences?
I don't know. I think David Lodge, obviously, to some degree. And I think I remember I started writing it when my mother used to come here to Vancouver from England, and she would sit knitting in the garden, and I would go out to be with her and needed something to do. And I think I'd recently seen the movie of The Bourne.
Born Identity.
Not the newborn ones, but the old one that had, I can't remember the actor's name now, but no, not Matt Damon. The one long before Matt Damon, in the 90s or 80s even. Anyway, that was just the way you can make an interesting story from people dealing drugs and murder and mayhem.
Yeah, there are topics that come up in movies a lot because they're exciting. You know, like, yeah. Nabin asks, what are your favorite campus novels?
I think the David Lodge novels, and oh dear, Stepping Westward, and the author I can't remember, but mainly David Lodge. I think was I liked his humor, and so I try to incorporate some of that in Tenure.
Kingsley Amos did a good one too.
Lucky Jim.
Lucky Jim.
I was never greatly enamored of Kingsley Amos, but
he does describe hangovers very well. I will give him that.
Well, he had a lot of experience, I guess.
And there's a question from Judy. Will your second novel be a sequel to this one?
Yes, it will be. Well, it'll have the same characters, but it's already drafted, largely written, but it's set largely in Kaliningrad and Moscow. But the same characters. There's the Vancouver base, but it's more connecting with the FSB or what used to be the KGB in Moscow, and the discovering that the a little like the drug dealers here. There's kind of ambivalence, moral ambivalence about them. And in the new novel, it's more an ambivalence about the mafia and the FSB, who are supposed to be the anti-crime people. And they're mixed up in very complicated ways, so that it's not clear whether the state or the mafia are the good guys and the bad guys. And it varies depending on context and conditions. So
No, that sounds very apt for some stuff that's been going on lately.
I'm afraid so. Yeah.
There's a question from Annabella as well.
Uh-huh.
How was writing this book different than the other 100 you wrote before?
Fewer footnotes.
Yeah, thank goodness. Footnotes are a pain. Sorry, I make the advanced reader copies that go out to reviewers, and I'm not a professional book designer, and footnotes scare me for that. So thank you for no footnotes. Hope the next one doesn't have any footnotes. Okay. No more questions on there for now. Let's hop back to one. We kind of talked about academic comedic novels already, but is there something about academia that combines well with humor? Because there are a lot of humorous academic novels.
That's true. Well, I think, again, as I said earlier, I think that the kind of freedom and the kind of nutty people who tend to gravitate towards the academic life lead to a richness of possibilities that is easy to explore if you're a writer.
And there might be something about how everyone's sequestered in their own obsessions, yet they come together as a department, which feels like
That's true. Yes.
like it could lead to some interesting conflict.
It's a little like a monastery in some ways. I think somebody like Umberto Eco, writing about the name of the rose, for example, allows you to see ways in which a community of that kind can create the very strangest motives and activities.
And then, yeah, no, like when I was in school, even just as a grad student, what I was trying to do it was different than my good friend sitting next to me was trying to do, and we're trying to help each other through it. It's like, well, not, and when you're dealing with creative writing, it's like, how can I lead you on this journey when I don't know where I'm going in the first place? So yeah, there's a lot of comedy in that. Yeah, no, I'm going to be thinking about this question a lot on my own. Of the academics in the book, who would you least like to be stuck in an elevator with, and for what reason?
Well, one of the characters he has to persuade to vote in favor of Susan Pybus is a fellow called Kenneth Gissing. And he is bribed by being offered a new and better desk because his passion was office furniture, which I discovered, strangely enough, is not so rare an obsession of some faculty members in universities. Anyway, that seems to be the limit of his interest in life, except for George Gissing, the writer, about whom he's written 300 books, or at least one book 300 times, with slight variations. I
was thinking him as well because he runs a lot.
That is true.
Yeah, like he'd probably be sweaty in the elevator. So that's as far as I took. Although the guy who hits on young women, I probably wouldn't want to be in an elevator with either for other reasons. Sam has a question. Do you think it's easier nowadays to get tenure or create a drug empire? Are you doing math?
Well, it's harder to get tenure because it's harder to get a job. I mean, the universities are contracting, particularly some departments. And so if you can't get a job, you can't get tenure. Whereas you can turn to the drug trade anytime. I have no idea. Nice
It
question.
would be more dangerous to try to become a drug kingpin, obviously.
Dangerous, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's easier to quit trying to be a professor, like, for example.
Right. That's true. You can walk away easier.
Yeah. But then you can walk away easier, which, yeah, harder to get to that final goal.
Right.
Anne asks, what courses did you teach at university, and has teaching changed over your tenure? It threw me off because I was thinking of the book and not the actual act of tenure. But
Right. Well, I taught, I mean, the main course I used to teach was a history of educational ideas, starting with Plato and coming up to modern day. I can see some people here grinning because they've suffered through this experience along with me. But so it's things like that I was teaching, but I'm not sure if any of it impacted on tenure.
oh, I think the question was like, did getting tenure change
Oh,
while you were working at the university? If I'm
I have
getting
no
the question.
idea. I think I must admit, it seemed to me once you got a job, it was easier to get tenure. When I started, a fair number of people did not get tenure. It's now much rarer for that to happen, certainly in some departments, and certainly in the department I was in.
Yeah, I just know from friends that it's nigh impossible. And that was, I'm not sure if I mentioned that was and oh no, did the nature, style, or methods of teaching change? And clarified.
Yeah, I guess so, somewhat. Technology had some impact. The computer, I mean,
I know.
nobody had ever heard email. Started teaching at Simon Fraser. So we used to have a typing pool, things like that, which are inconceivable now.
Yeah, I know. I never had to do a PowerPoint through university, but I know all the kids have to do PowerPoints and stuff now. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. But there's a question from Annabella. Oh, question from Jillian. Do you actually like the taste of that pineapple cottage cheesy nutty mix?
Well, I think we've refined it since, so that we have it for lunch nearly every day, except there's no pineapple in it. It's I have yogurt, Susanna has no yogurt, cottage cheese certainly, and mixed nuts and fruits and seeds. Makes a delicious and nutritious lunch.
It's delicious, but we don't put our retainers on the table.
Right.
I have it for breakfast.
Well, you're welcome.
I was quite insulted when I first heard the scene. I was like, it's delicious. And then I looked at it. I was like, okay, maybe it's not the most appetizing thing to look at, but it's tasty.
Yes, that's true.
I now do figs and stuff on the side, and I'll have fig, and then I'll eat I have this whole
I don't
process.
get it.
No retainer either, though.
Right.
Allison asks, what sources did you use for the drug scene? That's a question from Rob that Allison typed up.
A lot of newspapers and a few books, I think. Nothing, I mean, mostly it's made up. I think it's very easy to create a sense of intricate knowledge about something from relatively few facts. And as long as you get them right and build a plausible human context around it, you can persuade people you know something about it. That at least was my experience during my academic career.
Yeah, there's something about, I know this for horror writing anyways, you have to craft the really basic, like day-to-day stuff to make going away from that feel realistic.
Right.
Because if not, you're hopping into the deep end without your water wings sort of thing.
Right.
That makes complete sense. And I'm just checking. I think that's all the questions. So I think I'm going to ask one more question. If I missed one, some people are sending them direct message to Carolina, who is typing them to me. If I missed one, we'll go back to that. But I'll ask one more question, and then I think everyone will get to give a big round of applause for Kieran after that. So a lot of the action scenes in the book are very cinematic. Were there any movies, you mentioned the old Bourne Identity, but were there any other movies or TV shows that you thought about while writing or editing the scene? And were there any actors you pictured as playing any of the characters?
Not really. I think I imagined Antonio Banderas playing Mark Maratta.
That's good casting.
But he's getting on a bit now for that role. But bit of makeup and who knows.
Javier Bardem.
Less so. Bit too quirky, maybe.
Yeah, I was trying to think of it, but like there are a lot of like the Bourne movies that came onto my mind because there's a lot of getting in and out of tricky situations. Especially that scene on the campus where he's trying to persuade people and grabbing a jacket and stuff like that and kind of disguising yourself. Yeah, they're very cinematic.
Yeah.
If you all don't have the book, you should get the book and find out how cinematic they are. So I want to thank you, Kieran, for writing such a great book.
Well,
I want to thank the whole audience for being here.
Thank you for all your work on it. Thanks to AJ and to Sam for being and making a decoration for this evening. Thank you.
Yeah, to our special guest readers, to Kieran, to all of you for all your great questions. Usually I have like twice as many questions prepped, but usually the audience is shy. Kieran, you don't have shy friends, which I'm very helpful for these sort of events. I did want to mention just that the editor of the book, Doug Barber, did pass away recently. And I'm holding it together for this event, but it is just, this is the first event since, and it's one of his books he worked on. I just want to say, like, thanks to Doug as well for helping this project.
Sure.
And
he was wonderful to work with, yes.
Wonderful to work with, absolutely. He was a great guy. We have 2 more launch events coming up. One on October 19th. It's a double launch of 2 debut novels, also very Vancouver based. Leah Renata's The Sinister Salon, which was also edited by Doug. Oh no, sorry, wrong one. And Andy Zuliani's Last Tide, which was edited by Doug. He didn't edit The Sinister Salon. And closing the online launches is the launch of the new landmark edition of Thomas Wharton's novel Icefields, which will be hosted by Suzette Mayer on October 26th. Information about all these events is on our website, newwestpress.com. There's one W in that. And all our books are there, and future events will be posted there too. Other ways to keep in the know is to sign up for our newsletter, which you can also do on our website, or follow us on social media. The links and handles are in the chat box. Thanks again, everyone. As I always say at the end of events, remember, if you can, please continue to support small publishers and bookstores of any size. We wouldn't be here without you all. Congrats to Kieran.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.